Hi, welcome again to Storytime at the Arvid E. Miller Memorial Library and Museum. Today we are going to read Chester Nez and the Unbreakable Code, a Navajo code talker's story. October 1929, month of small wind. When Bertoli was 8 years old, the time came for him to go to boarding school. He had to leave his family, his home, and the goats and the sheep that he loved and took care of. He climbed into the back of the missionary's truck. "You need an English name," the missionary said. Bertoli's name was Navajo, like he was. "You will be Chester," the man said. At Fort Defiance School, the matrons shaved off Chester's long hair and gave him a blue uniform to wear. They made him use English, a language he had never spoken, and when Chester spoke Navajo, the matrons washed his mouth out with yellow soap. "Navajo is bad. Speak only English." Many years earlier, in the 1860s, the U.S. Army had held Navajos captive at Fort Defiance. From there, the Army forced the Navajos to go on the Long Walk, a journey of 300 miles into what is now New Mexico. Many people suffered and died. Fort Defiance was now a boarding school for Navajo children, but some of the youngest students had bad dreams because of the fort's history. Chester did his best to calm their fears at night. He reminded them that they were not alone and that they still had families back home. June 1932, month of big planting. Over the summer, Chester returned home where he could again speak the sacred language the holy people had given the Navajo a long time ago. When he cared for the sheep and the goats and prayed using corn pollen, he felt like a real Navajo, living the right way. His heart was strong again. Being home took the loneliness Chester felt at school away. September 1932, month of half. Chester returned to school, where he was again told his Navajo language was worthless. "You must only use English to survive in the white man's world," the matron said. Chester knew he might need to live in the white man's world one day. In that world, speaking English was essential, so he worked hard and did well. Chester enjoyed learning and wanted to prove his worth. He also learned to pray the Catholic way and served as an altar boy. The Catholic way was good, but so was the Navajo way. Though he spoke English at school, Chester kept his love for his Navajo people and their language. He decided to never break the ties that bound him to them. December 1941, month of crusted snow. Chester was in 10th grade when the school principal called the students together. "The Japanese Empire attacked us at Pearl Harbor," he said. "We are at war." The United States had fought the Navajo years ago, but now the United States was their country too. Chester thought about how his ancestors stood up against enemies. He should act with the same courage. Protecting his homeland was an honor. "I am a warrior," Chester said to himself. "I will fight for this land." April 1942, month of big plants. Recruiters from the U.S. Marine Corps came to the reservation. "We need Navajo men who speak English and Navajo," they said. The U.S. military needed a new way to send its secret messages. The messages were sent in code over the radio, but since anyone's radio could receive those messages, the enemy could hear them too. The Japanese had broken every American code. The Marines tried using a coding machine, the shackle, to create an unbreakable code, but the machine took too long to encode and decode the messages. Then, a former Army soldier, a missionary's son, who had once lived on the Navajo reservation, suggested using Navajo, a language almost impossible for non-Navajos to speak. The Marines agreed to try it. Many Navajos volunteered to join the Marines, but only 29 were chosen, including Chester. They became Platoon 382. Suddenly, the language he had been told to forget was important. Chester was proud that he had never given up speaking Navajo. June 1942, month of big planting. After basic training, Platoon 382 went to Camp Elliott near San Diego. An officer took the platoon into a room. "Create an unbreakable code," he said. "Start by choosing one word for every letter of the English alphabet." Then the officer left, locking the 29 men in that room. Chester wondered how they would begin. Then one of them, Gene Crawford, spoke up. He knew how military codes worked. "Make every word clear and different from every other," he said to the others. They used English words for each letter of the alphabet. A was ant, B was bear, C was cat. Then they chose the Navajo words for each of those English words. Ant was wulachi, bear was shush, cat was mosaic. By the end of the first day, they had the whole alphabet. A few weeks later, 3 more Navajo men joined the team. Now 32 soldiers were creating the code and learning how to use it. Instead of spelling out some items in the English alphabet, they chose Navajo words to represent them. Battleship became Lotsut, which means whale. Bombs were Aishi, or eggs. There was a lot to remember, but Chester enjoyed what they were doing and had an excellent memory. September 1942, month of half. After 13 weeks, Platoon 382 demonstrated their code to Marine officials. Expert code breakers could not break it. The code was strong. The code was efficient, too. The shackle code machine took 4 hours to encrypt and decrypt a message Navajos could send and receive in less than 3 minutes. The Navajo language solved the Marines' communication problems. The military ordered the platoon to keep the code a secret. Only commanders and officers knew about the Navajo code. 2 men stayed behind to teach new Navajo recruits, while Chester and the rest of the code talkers shipped out to the Pacific. The time had come to use the code in battle. When their boat reached the island of Guadalcanal, Chester and his partner Roy Begay waded ashore. They dug a foxhole in the sand, and then they were ready. When a runner handed them their first message, they radioed it to 2 code talkers off the ship's shore. "Enemy, machine gun, nest, on your right flank, destroy." Minutes after the message was received, artillery fire hit the machine gun nest. Chester shouted, "You see that?" Their Navajo code was working. Chester and the other code talkers sent messages to Guadalcanal for many months, until the Japanese were defeated. Then they were sent to other islands in the Pacific. The soldiers saw terrible things in combat. They dodged artillery fire, witnessed explosions, and watched men die. Chester was worn out and ill, but kept working. Every day he prayed in Navajo, using corn pollen from his medicine bag. The Navajo way gave him strength and helped him survive until he could go home. January 1945, month of Small Eagle. Chester was finally home, but he'd seen too much death. He felt at times as if he were dead too. Chester could not tell anyone, not even his family, about the Navajo code. It was still a secret. Keeping that secret brought back the loneliness that hurt so much when he first went to school. Chester's family knew he needed help. They arranged an enemy way, a 4-day-long ceremony to help someone exposed to the evil of war. The ceremony was also done for children returning from boarding school, like Fort Defiance. Chester knew that being at school, with its military structure and harsh discipline, was similar to enduring war. The ceremony restored Chester to the trail of beauty and the right way. He no longer dreamed of war. September 1945, month of half. 8 months after Chester came home, the war was over. The Navajo Code had been vital to the war effort. Code talkers had served with every Marine unit. By the end of the war, more than 400 Navajos had served as code talkers. They had been told in school that their language was no good, but they had proven that wasn't true. The Navajo Code helped win World War II. Like his people who survived the long walk, Chester had never forgotten his Navajo heritage. Despite being told to give up his Navajo language and culture, he found ways to merge them with the white man's world. His spirit stayed unbroken. He kept his feet on the trail of beauty. The end. If you want to learn more about the Navajo Code Talkers, you can search them online. You can Google Navajo Code Talkers, and there are a few documentaries that are out that you can watch to learn a little bit more. Thank you for joining Storytime today and learning about Chester Nez and the Unbreakable Navajo Code.